What we will have now is our Fireside chat, and the topic will be designing and delivering the digital lab, strategizing AstraZeneca's route towards connecting and digitalizing labs throughout a global organization. So we want to have a chat here in front of you, but we also want you to participate. So we will ask you questions, and we would like you to participate a little bit. And so maybe just to introduce Amrik, who is now taking care of the projector, because it's not really pleasant to sit here and have the light right in your eyes. So Dr. Amrik Mahal has 25 years experience working in the pharmaceutical sector, primarily in R&D, having worked with AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline, and Evotec. He is currently the global head of IT for early science at AstraZeneca, accountable for developing and driving the IT strategy, partnering with the R&D senior leaders and delivery of projects and services to discovery and development scientists, covering a wide range of scientific applications and end-user disciplines. He has a proven ability to successfully provide leadership of teams across multiple domains, internally and externally, with academia and industry. So with this background, I think he's the right person for us to have this chat. And so I actually would like to start the entire conversation with a question or the ask for Amrik to share with us the digital lab strategy that AstraZeneca is undertaking right now.
Great. Okay, thanks very much for that introduction. It's amazing what you tend to put on LinkedIn. I was just listening to that thinking, wow, have I really written that?
Yes.
But thanks very much. So my name's Amrit Mahal. I'm the head of IT for the research part of AstraZeneca. I've been with AZ for 20 years. And I was just chatting with Daniela last night. You know, for those of you who follow the pharma industry closely, you know, AstraZeneca have been through a journey. About 6 years ago, we had a number of patent expiries. We lost 16 billion in revenues, and it's been a real challenge for us to return to growth. Happy to say that at the beginning of last year, we've turned the corner. We've got a great portfolio. But what that's done during those 5 years is we've had to make decisions on where we were going to invest our money. And unfortunately, the labs was always one place, and the scientists was always one place that was low on the priority list. You know, it always tended to be for the new drug projects. So we've built up quite a technical debt in our laboratories, and we managed to secure funding to really kickstart investment in the labs as of last year. And it's split into 3 components. One, and this sounds quite boring, it's about modernizing what we've got in the labs. You know, we have an aging estate. We have over 3,000 instruments or linked. We've got the whole problems with XP, Windows 7, Windows 10, which I'm sure resonates with you. You know, that it's missing that life cycle management. We talk to our vendors, and some of them have got you know, that roadmap coming up to newer versions of Windows 10. Others, they just don't have that. And you know, I think somebody mentioned earlier segregated networks. So that's things that we do. You know, other areas that we've been quite draconian this year. We've also stopped the use of USBs across all of our company now. And you may think, wow, that's pretty bad. But if you look at the amount of ransomware and malware attacks that happen, you know, there was something like last year across the industry, there was 7.2 billion malware attacks, and ransomware about 150 million. So, you know, it's really about protecting your estate. And other boring things as part of that modernization as well is making sure we've got everything listed in our CMDB, you know, the configuration management database, simple things like that. So if there are challenges with this, we can patch quickly, we know what we've done. The second part of our journey really is about having an integrated lab service for our scientists. You know, what currently happens in the lab, we've got a bit of a skeleton crew that we've contracted to do a bit of break fix, but we find that a lot of our bright scientists who we've employed to do the science are actually doing IT in the labs. So it's moving away from that, bringing together the IT part of this, having people on the ground, really working closely with the scientists. And part of it is then bringing all of that into the lifecycle management. How do we manage the applications in the labs? How do we do that license and vendor management? At the moment, it's very much dependent on what lab you work in or what site. There's no global control on that. And sorry for you vendors out there, but that means that we're getting a lot tighter in what have we got across AstraZeneca and have a lot more meaningful discussions about how we all come to particular versions across the estate. Another thing that, as part of that, is also something we've kicked off called Time to Bench. So this is about IT absolutely being ingrained in that procurement exercise as well. We find that we buy lots of expensive equipment. We buy sequences worth over $1 million. They come, they arrive, they sit in a docking bay, and that's because nobody knew that they were coming. And then it's running around trying to do the architecture blueprints and get it all connected up. Now, very much we're connected at an early phase, and part of that journey is getting that instrumentation connected up in a safe way. So there are two aspects, but the most exciting bit for me, and what resonates with what I've heard in the labs, in the talks today, is really about digitizing all of the workflows for our scientists. How do we look at capturing data from our instruments, the raw data? How do we tag it correctly? We've heard a lot about standards. How do we make sure that we apply the standards on this? How do we put it into a data lake and then have some sort of data layer over the top so we can access all of that information? You know, it's absolutely incredible the amount of different workflows we've got for the same instrumentations within the company. So we've kicked off looking at mass spec and pathology imaging and trying to work through those, simplify those workflows, and then, of course, we need to be able to scale across all of the other analytical techniques. And then the other part of it is digitizing that process for our scientists. So again, thinking of the scientists, we've got, you know, the traditional lab notebooks, which we know, you know, people, it's not great. And it's just changing the mindset. My boss said, Amrik, we need to have a standardized ELN. And I said, we don't. It's actually about data capture and then aligning it to the workflows and just making sure that, you know, for the scientists, we make it meaningful. Let's just not try and put a vanilla ELN in as a document management repository. So that's part of it. And, you know, other elements that we're also doing, and one of the reasons I'm pleased to be in Berlin today is we're working with a company called LabTwin, and, you know, looking at how we can start using voice in the lab as well. And that's a challenge in itself. I think last year one of my colleagues came and spoke at this conference. We're a year on. The voice technology is great. LabTwin have been an excellent partner to work with. Is it something that we're going to use? The jury is still out. You know, for our scientists, it's a big change. They still want to go back. They don't trust it. They want to go back and check on the screen. Has it worked correctly? Am I capturing everything that I'm talking through? Mm-hmm. There's a challenge with the scientific language that we're using. How does that get captured? And then there's some of the logistics of, you know, having to wear a headset all day. And some of the scientists feel very uncomfortable working in a lab, you know, talking into a microphone and, you know, maybe for those introverts, it's quite difficult. So that's just a little bit of a flavor of what we're currently doing.
Mm-hmm. So you already mentioned a couple of technologies, and I think with voice recognition, voice control, that's pretty interesting. Maybe a question to the audience. Who of you already does have some experience as well, which might be similar or different to what Amrik just said? Anything you would like to share? Or
Is anybody
We need a
using
mic.
voice in the labs? No?
Thank you. One of the things that we've found where I work, which is very similar to what you're saying, is that we have had people who have said, oh, we want to just have an ELN. That's all we want. We just want an ELN. But the thing is that that data is the bit that's important, because if you just write it onto an ELN and you just store it in the background, it becomes that dead end. It becomes a data grave where data goes to die and you can't resurrect it. We found that by providing the ELN as the front end to store the data, that where people are able to pull that data back out again, that's where we find value. And then that comes back to your point of being able to get to the data.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely
really
spot on. Because ELN, there's nothing, exciting about an ELN. It's just a data capture. It's what you do with that data, and also thinking about how you're going to connect to the instrumentation. So having all of that data just then going into your data lake from your instruments, from your ELNs, aligning it to that workflow.
Hello, I'm from UCB. I was interested to know what you do with the voice. We tried several years ago to use voice and Google, etc., things, devices, and the noise was so high in the room with the laminar flows, etc., that it was almost impossible to use the voice. And we considered the voice only to manage things like a Google Glass, to manage a checklist, etc. So what did you put in place for voice? Is it just using voice as a keyboard, kind of keyboard entry, or what?
Yes, absolutely. So it's using voice to capture those notes as they're working in the labs. And what we've also found is that where you've got labs which have got well-defined protocols and things, it's not so great. Where you've got people really experimenting, or certainly in the in vivo labs as well, where you're kitted up with gloves and you're in and out, there it makes a big difference, because you're doing stuff on the move. You don't want to change your protective clothes. Then you're just making the notes, capturing them and going back, and then checking that you've got everything that you've done through that experimentation.
Yeah, thanks.
So we just talked about voice recognition, then Google Glasses have been mentioned. So what technology do you see having the biggest impact in the lab going forward?
So I think, we all have embraced cloud, and we've got a number of the vendors now, linking their instrumentation to the cloud as well. And I think there's a real opportunity there of, when you're running experimentation, you're taking the data onto the cloud, but also with vendors to look at the instruments and being able to alert and look at preventative maintenance. Why wait until something's going to break? Get in quickly. But for us, we've really embraced open collaboration as well, working with CROs, working with other companies. As we're taking data off and we're putting it in a standardized format, how quickly can we share that through different cloud technologies, and vice versa? What are they doing that we can start seeing and really collaborating? So for me, cloud technology is certainly one, and the vendors really seeing them move that way. Thermo Fisher are doing some great work in that space. I think the other thing is automation. We've had automation for a while. We've got the robots in the labs, in the high throughput screening labs. All of that is good, but what we're also really seeing is an increase in things like RPA, robotic process automation. This is like macros on steroids. This is taking a lot of the processes which are very time-consuming, well-defined, but taking those and moving that data through the system, removing those transcription errors, moving it away from, scientists have to do these sorts of tasks. Now, what I would say with RPA is great to, release scientists' time, but it's not the solution, because what you're doing really with RPA is just putting a Band-Aid over a broken process. Obviously, when you come back to replace something in that process, or you look at that whole process, then you need to build that into your design. RPA is just there at the moment really to be able to help you free up some of your scientists from these routine tasks and move your data along. And then I think the final one, I just listened to Mark next door in Labware. It's the Internet of Things. And, again, a great opportunity. And he said, we've all got to get together and really help change the vendor's mindset on this. Bluetooth, wireless, all very cheap technologies. How can we change that and get them thinking about Internet of Things? Imagine it from an end user perspective. As a scientist, I'm wearing a tag which has got all of my details. I go up to an instrument, it's already waiting, all of my data is going to come off. It knows that I've done all of the training for it. I don't have to sign any of the security protocols. It knows what I'm about to do. All of that should be seamless of how you connect with instrumentation. And I think in one of the sessions, we also saw something about augmented reality. Again, very similar. You can see how some of that can work in labs. And not so sure about the R&D labs so much, but I know certainly within AstraZeneca in our operational scale-up laboratories and our manufacturing sites, they've really embraced augmented reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's quite a spectrum of technology that you are looking into that makes the life in the lab easier, more efficient,
absolutely,
more reliable,
absolutely.
Probably. And I can see a lot of connectivity there. It's always about connectivity. When you mention it, it's always connecting to the human, to the people working there. So any other technologies or experience with really newer technologies anyone of the audience would like to share? Or a question for Amrik regarding?
There's one there.
There is a type of connectivity that I think people are kind of rushing over, and I think this is the most severe one, is the people connectivity that you briefly touched on it, which for me means to actually address this bottom-up process more and more. You said it shortly, Amrik, when you said we don't need an ELN. There are sometimes solutions that fit for the purpose, but the mindset is not ready yet for that. My experience in this field is that when you enter a lab and there is no level of digitalization, then you can take as many high-tech systems, processes in there. You will not get there because the mindset is not yet ready. People may not know how they can benefit from the system. And I think for this path, what is actually very important is to take also a phase one step, which is empowering or giving the first step of managing the data. It's not a technology that we would want to discuss in this round, but I think this is very critical to get the people on board, to have something like a semi-digitalization path. And then on top of that, you can start with magics, with augmented reality, with more automation, and so on. But when you try to bundle this all up and throw it against the lab, that's going to fail, or you're going to have one project after another to modify, to readjust, because you first start doing a lot of customization while you shouldn't be, and then later on you end up going back to the out of the box. So my point in this digitalization path is to also think of a small step path, especially in labs that are not at that stage yet. And then once you have data integrity in place, once you have a number of systems, once you're in control of data governance, then you can play around with these fancy digital tools.
Absolutely. It's a great point, Sam. And I think, we are going stepwise. One of the final points that we'll talk on here, and you saw it on Daniela's slide this morning, was the Lego man with the scientist at the heart of everything. There's loads of technologies out there. We can try and embrace them all. You've got to have really good use cases. We saw Heine talking about MVPs. Let's get some of those up and working, see what works. The data governance and data standardization is absolutely critical. We know that Novartis have been on a journey for 3 years to try and standardize theirs. AstraZeneca kicked off theirs last year. It's going to be multi-year, multi-million nightmare to sort out all of the data that we've got. we've touched on standards quite a lot already, but everybody in this room knows the difficulty with standards. We are now trying to really put in this strong data governance. We heard it from Heine, the data governance, the data stewardship. Make sure all of that is done and then map as much of our data to that as possible. And then when we start talking about using the technology in the labs, making sure that we're following that governance and bringing it through. You know, a lot of it, we talk about data capture, a lot of it is about data reproducibility. There was that paper in Nature a few years ago where 70% of people can't reproduce another scientist's work, or 50% of scientists can't reproduce their own work. So what are we missing there? You know, is it the richness of the way that we capture our experimentation? There's obviously something amiss, and we really need to make sure that we nail that whole data capture and workflow process.
You mentioned mass spectrometry data at the beginning. Why did you choose this type of data to start with? Because I would imagine it's maybe not the easiest one to start with. And what exactly are you doing?
Yeah, we chose mass spec just because it gets quite political in a big organization such as AstraZeneca. You have lots of functions, you've got lots of therapeutic areas. Mass spec was one that all of the functions used. We have, you know, probably one of the largest collections of mass specs across AstraZeneca. So we've got the high-end stuff, we've got the stuff in the lab. So we really wanted to go after one where, you know, if we could prove and streamline this, it's going to make it easier for us to get investment year on year to go after things like NMR and chromatography and then other analyticals. You know, we've also gone for imaging because imaging, again, is a great opportunity for us to standardize that. And we also know by standardizing all of your data, then that gives you the platform to do machine learning and AI. And imaging is one area where, you know, lots and lots of opportunities to do that.
Yeah, I would like to follow up a little bit on the human connectivity aspect. So I think the data part we are very excited about, but what we hear from our users in the labs is really they are interested about user experience and how do they interact actually with the systems. And I think historically, as an industry, I don't think we have put a lot of effort on user experience, and there's also a lot of the vendor solutions. I think the feedback we get from our actual lab scientists is still kind of horrific in some cases, actually. And I'd like to hear a little bit from you, how do you build in now really user experience into your projects? How much investment goes into that part versus the functionality, and how do you really kind of follow there really the user-centric spirit?
And that's a fantastic question, because at the end of the day, you know, I'm a scientist and I would not want IT coming and telling me that this is how I should be working in the lab. So the way that we've set up is that we have quite a large scientist population. We call them lab champions, who are absolutely involved in all of this as we go through this. What's going to work, what isn't, what are the real issues? So we're working very closely in partnership with them. The other part of it is, you know, we've already got lots and lots of existing systems within that whole estate, you know, looking at where we can use UX, looking at how we can make it a lot easier for scientists to be able to interact with these. We've heard it quite a lot today. It's all about that change management. And I was having a drink with Stig last night in the bar. I don't know where he sat, but he was saying that his wife is a scientist and he struggles to convince her about this. And it is really, you know, bringing them on board, showing them the value and bringing them on that change and getting them to own it. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we can put as many technologies in as possible, but if your scientist is not buying into it, not seeing the value and not part of it, it's not going to work. Mark has just talked next door about change anxiety. You know, a lot of the scientists that we have in the labs, including me, when we were at university, you know, we never had things like electronic lab notebooks. It was all paper-based, and I don't think we even had Post-its then, shows how old I am. But, you know, again, we've got to be able to bring them on this journey. My kids are a lot younger than I am, and I see them multitasking. You know, I see my kids on their phones, and for them, they don't need a keyboard or go to a PC. They can just do it very remotely. So it's being able to cater for that next generation, Generation X and Y. How do they work in the labs, and learn from them? So there's a lot that we've got to do to really put the scientists at the heart of it, but there's also a generation thing here as well of learning of what the new scientists are bringing on board and what we can learn from them.
So with the challenges that you found in your journey, so am I right then that it's really the change management, the communication and the engagement, the buy-in of the users at the end?
Absolutely, because this is a big investment for them. We run what's called a pulse survey every twice a year across the business. And the amount of heat that I get from our scientists when they're saying, this is not working or this is causing us delays, of course it gets escalated up and then I have to respond to it. But you've got to take it back down to that level of the scientists working in the labs. What is their skills? What's their expertise? How am I going to make their life easy for them? Making sure they've got the modern equipment that they need, making sure that they've got a really good lab service which is going to help them with any issues that they have, and then really thinking about how we can embrace some of this new technology and taking them on the journey with us. Just seeing the sign that we've got a few minutes left, so I think on that final point I'd like to just play this video which shows really why we think about putting our scientists at the heart of things. And this is set in Gothenburg, where we've actually adopted activity-based working for all of our scientists in the labs. So historically, we've grown and people have been in labs all over the place, and they've worked separately dependent on the building that we've been in. So we've had this large project of really reshaping the whole of the Gothenburg site and creating centers of excellence where people who are working on similar projects, all the mass spec guys come together, all the NMR folk come together, people working on drug projects, they all come together. So really trying to get them to engage and have that opportunity for collaboration, and hopefully this video will give you a taste of that.
I think this is really encouraging for the lab of the future, what you can achieve if you leverage technology and gear it towards humans. So I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So we have seen the lab of the future. Where do you see the lab in the future in, let's say, 10 years? Because you said in the past it has been neglected. Now we have technology, we are moving. Where do you see it?
So it's a really good question, Daniela. I mean, struggling with the lab of the future at the moment, but for 10 years out there, you know, I think we're breaking down a lot of barriers. I've certainly seen within my time at AstraZeneca, you know, big pharma, we were very much protective. We would do this, we're working in here, but it's actually a great big ecosystem. We need to be working together, you know, on these pre-collaborative arrangements. We need to be working with industry. We need to be working with academia. You know, there's a lot of stuff to go after. There's a lot of patients out there to cure. So for me, it's about that ecosystem. It's about being open, being able to share data very freely. And even with this setup in Gothenburg, Pascal Sorier, when he saw this, he said, wow, this is fantastic. The next question he said was, right, how are we going to get partners coming in and working with you? How are we going to get vendors coming in and helping you develop your new instrumentation or new diagnostics? So it's all about that collaboration. And for me, it's that next generation, seeing how they work, how they use different types of technologies. How can we really embrace that and take people on that journey with us?
Okay. Thank you so much, Emmerich. It is a journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.